Our dark stories today are derived from real-life experiences. Our first story sees three friends going on an annual camping trip to a state park. Everything seems and feels just like their ordinary fun-filled get-togethers. Until one of them encounters something in the woods that takes him back in time to a spine-chilling event that will haunt him beyond his worst nightmares. And then in our second story, a young man travels down to New Orleans to experience the mystified haunted dark side of the city. He gets way more than he bargains for, when he comes face to face with the Voodoo Queen herself. Three friends, Billy, Mark, and Frank, set out for a nice weekend. These three friends have been camping together since they were in the Boy Scouts. After a 3-hour drive, they arrived at the state park, which they go to twice a year. They agreed to go stake out a place, set up their tents, before getting out on the trails. This first adventure was nothing more than to do a little sightseeing. These guys have been coming to the park for years, and knew the trails very well. It was unseasonably hot that day, so the guys made a lot of stops along the way to keep hydrated. The three friends also took these break times to catch up on life and reminiscing about the past. Before long, the sun began to set, and it was time to head back to the campsite. Billy told Mark and Frank to go ahead, because he wanted to snap a cool picture of the sunset. After getting what he felt was an absolute awesome picture of the sunset from his favorite peak, Billy began his trek back to catch up to his friends. The darkness began to fall faster than he anticipated, so he stopped and pulled out a small LED lantern to light his way. Just as he made it about 100 yards down the trail, he saw what appeared to be a small fire, just off the trail, deeper into the woods. He stopped and thought, "I need to go investigate this." A forest fire could be deadly for anyone staying overnight. Billy pulled out a small machete that he kept in the bag for times he may need to venture into the woods. As he chopped his way toward the fire, it seemed to move further away from him. It also seemed to grow more and more dim. After about 10 more steps, Billy stopped and wondered if his eyes were playing tricks on him. Suddenly the fire seemed to disappear. So, he turned and began to make his way back to the trail. Just as the pathway turned, he saw a very weird image up ahead of him, that was not there before. He couldn't quite make it out, but it was definitely all white. As he got closer, his heart started racing. He held the lamp up higher to get a better visual. It became more apparent that he was now staring at a woman, standing by the opening of the trail, in a white formal dress. Her face looked ghostly, and her eyes just downright creepy. He stopped and didn't know what to do. Here she was, standing right in front of the opening to the trail. Then it hit him, like a ton of bricks. This was the girl in the white dress. There is an old story that had been passed down from a long time ago, about a girl who went to her prom, and later that night, was taken into this very park, and murdered. The legend was that she has haunted the park for years. There have been many sightings of her walking around the outskirts of the park, in her prom dress, and then disappears. Of course these three friends had never seen her before. Now, Billy started to feel even more fear within himself, and began to panic. Just in that moment, the girl turned around, walked away, and vanished. This was his opportunity to jump back on the trail and book it back to the campsite. Billy ran down the trail as fast as he could. When he reached his friends, Billy told the two of them about the encounter, and they all just packed up their belongings, and left the park. The experience was so traumatizing, they all agreed to never return again. Before we continue with our story, if you enjoy true crime, dark, strange and mysterious stories, you've come to the right place. We upload at least once a week. Please, like and subscribe to our channel, and turn on all notification, so you'll never miss new content. I took a trip to New Orleans to visit some haunted places. I checked into my hotel, which is in the French Quarter, the heart of the historic district. Being there was a small balcony in my room, I decided to open the French doors, lie down, and listen to some jazz. Before long, it became dusk, so I ventured out into the French Quarter to make my way around. I was really hoping to find a haunted building or something else scary to check out. It seemed like I had been walking for an hour, when I bumped into this woman, who was wearing a rather unusual outfit that had African accents blended in it. What stuck out the most was her large hat, that had a leopard print design throughout its structure. She handed me a card and asked me if I would like a private tour to learn about the Voodoo Queen, Marie Laveau. I responded by saying, absolutely. She then told me to call the number on the back of the card when I was ready, and we both moved along while I thanked her. I continued to take in all the sights and sounds of the city for the rest of the night. When morning came, I decided to call the number on the back of the card. Who wouldn't want to learn about the Voodoo Queen? I dialed the number, and after a couple rings, a deep, female voice answered and asked if I was ready to meet the living spirit of Marie Laveau. I told her not only yes, but that I couldn't hold my excitement in. This was the reason I came to New Orleans. She instructed me to meet her on a particular street corner at midnight. I now had the rest of the day to walk around the French Quarter, anticipating what would come that night. I thought to myself, what could be better? Here I was in one of the most haunted places in America, with a chance to learn about one of the scariest people ever. The one and only Voodoo Queen herself. When midnight struck, I was standing on the exact corner, as I was directed. Within seconds, the woman appeared from the dark street, and greeted me. It's almost as though she came out of nowhere. As excited as I was, it did seem kind of strange that no one else was there to take the tour. The woman asked me to follow her. We slowly made our way down the dimly lit streets. As we walked, she told me all the details of the Voodoo Queen's black magic rituals, while showing me the very places she performed them. Some of the locations were old parks, where people would gather to chant, and see the voodoo work its magic, but she also took me to some of the old homes where she either placed her curses, or healed the sick. As we left each location, I could hear a distant low sound of tribal drums playing. I stopped at one point and felt a great deal of anxiety. I really had to ask myself, was this in my head, or was I actually hearing these drums? The woman then asked me to follow her into the neighborhood. Suddenly we found ourselves right in front of the home the Voodoo Queen once occupied. It was absolutely surreal. The lights from inside the house had a strange bright glow. I suddenly heard those tribal drums again. But, this time, I heard a distant screech that was followed by loud moans. It was like some strange ritual was going on inside that house. I turned to the woman and asked, "Are we both hearing the same thing?" She responded by telling me that I might be coming down with a voodoo curse. I was now flat out scared and ready to leave. She told me we had one last stop to make and then the tour would be concluded. While this whole tour was interesting, the woman was extremely strange, and I was having an out-of-body experience. I guess that was the reason I came to New Orleans in the first place. It was living up to all my expectations. We finally made it to our last spot. It was one of the oldest and creepiest cemeteries I've ever seen. The woman guided me into the entrance, and then walked me around a maze of tall tombs. I saw plenty of broken cement walls and cobwebs everywhere. It was also extremely dark inside the cemetery. As we continued walking, the woman abruptly stopped and told me I had to walk the rest of the way alone. She said that we were almost there. She instructed me to walk down to the end of this row and then look to the left. I realized that it had to be Marie's grave. I also realized that this was the scariest part of the tour. I began walking and then I suddenly felt a breeze of cold air hit me in the face as I passed the third tomb. I looked back, and the woman had vanished. There was no turning back now. So I continued walking and finally made it to the end of the row. I looked to the left, just as she told me, and there it was, Marie Laveau's tomb. I was amazed because this just wasn't a regular tomb with flowers out front. The tomb was covered with red X's and handprints. There were bowls of burnt incense, jewelry, and stuffed animals all lined up in the front. I now realized that people have come here to make offerings to this queen. Just as I was taking everything all in, I suddenly see what appears to be a woman dressed in all black, walk from around the side of the tomb. I was sure this wasn't my tour guide. Her head, face, and entire body were all covered by black cloth. Almost like a black apparition. My heart was beating a mile a minute, and I felt frozen in place. This figure seemed like it started to float around the side, until it is facing me. I began to panic and literally could not scream. I tried but nothing would come out of my mouth. I felt like me and this figure were just staring each other down. I became so anxious, my heart felt like it was going to jump out my chest. Then, in a sudden instant, the figure hovering in midair, rushed towards me with its arms extended out. I did finally get the strength to run. So I ran as fast as I could, back the way I came in. I certainly didn't look back. Luckily, I found the gate we entered through and ran out into the street. I proceeded to run for long as I can remember. If this experience has taught me anything, voodoo is real.